to the European Criminology Oral History project. Today is the 12th of September and we are here at the 2024 Eurocrim conference in beautiful Bucharest. My name is Getoš Kalac. I am full professor at the Zagreb Faculty of Law and head of the Balkan Criminology Network. It is my great pleasure to be here today with the former director of the Max Planck Institute for Foreign and International Criminal Law in Freiburg in Germany, and the current Director Emeritus at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Crime, Security and Law, Professor Dr. Hans-Jörg Albrecht. You are also a honorary professor and faculty member at the Law Faculty of the University of Freiburg, guest professor at the Center for Criminal Law and Criminal Justice at the China University of Political Sciences and Law, and at the law faculties of Hainan University, Renmin University, Wuhan University, Beijing Normal University, and Dalian Ocean University, to name but a few. You are also one of the 26 founding members who back in 2000 established the European Society of Criminology. Now, with the European Criminology Oral History project, we aim at creating an organized collection of recorded interviews with prominent criminological scholars, such as yourself, who played a role in the development of European criminology. You have been the director of the Max Planck Institute for Foreign and International Criminal Law in Freiburg in Germany for almost 3 decades. To be more exact, since 1997. Prior to that, you were at the law faculties of the University of Tübingen, then Freiburg, followed by Konstanz and Dresden. Besides your background in legal studies, you also studied sociology. When you think back at your early days, how did you get into criminology in the first place? Was it the consequence of a clear decision in the sense of, so, I'm gonna be a criminologist? Or was it rather something you grew into as your studies and academic career evolved?
Now, that is an interesting question. I will be honest. After I had my exams in law, and after I studied also, I added sociology to that. I was offered a position at the Max Planck Institute in Freiburg. And as I was not that much interested in becoming a judge or a prosecutor, and I was not interested in working in the judicial system, in ministries or administration, I thought that is a good opportunity to find perhaps professional options which keep me out of these kind of jobs which are linked to, say, a lot of routines and so on. And particularly also, of course, hierarchies. So it's something I did not that much like at all. So I decided to accept that offer at the Max Planck Institute in the Department of Criminology, which had been established at the end of the 1960s, and I started there at the mid-1970s after I concluded studies in Tübingen and in Freiburg. And then my career took off. As simple as that. I liked, in general, the concept which was introduced by the former director of the Max Planck Institute Freiburg, the criminological department, the head of the criminological department, Günter Kaiser, for one reason. Of course, Günter Kaiser was a very serious and also very successful academic. However, he introduced the concept into criminology and the study of crime victimization and the criminal justice system, which went away from what is called etiological criminology, looking for causes of crime. So he was interested in the mechanisms of social control, in particular criminal social control, control by criminal law. And that was focused on a question which I find still today very interesting, the question of selection. And while the traditional criminology and beginning of the 20th century produced a lot of these types of criminologists, were interested in finding out why certain people commit crimes and others not. We was then interested in finding out why certain people go to prison while others don't go to prison, although they also commit partially very serious crimes. So that is what I would say what was the causes of my way into criminology. So it's a certain mix out of personal motives. I did not like these kind of conventional professional activities and routines on the one hand, and I liked academic freedom. And second, I was interested in these questions which came up with criminological theories which are partially then related to what is called labeling theory, stigmatization theory, Becker and others names and theories and approaches I knew from sociology and the study of sociology. So that is the basic reasons why I entered this discipline and profession ultimately.
Okay, thank you. But if I, in a nutshell, one could say that you're lucky that essentially criminology found you and not the other way around, although you had the appeal for it, yeah?
Yeah, but I mean, I do not complain about that. It's it was an offer, and I'm not that modest. I understood why I got this offer, because I would have also chosen me myself.
From this, I already see that you're happy with the choice you made, obviously.
I didn't think that much about that. So I didn't think that much about an academic career, being professor of whatever, or director of my institute. That was outside of my thinking back then. I thought the offer was okay, was a good contract, interesting work, research. I could go into carrying out research. Back then it was on day fines and sentencing and so on. So that was, I found that very interesting, and that gave me a lot of freedom. I didn't have to comply with strict hours of being at in the office and so on. So it was a
perfect match. Okay, great. Who would you say were the dominant scholars back in your early days that had a major impact on your scientific development?
So it was, I think, it was several people. In particular, of course, one that was Günter Kaiser, back then the head of the criminological department, who offered the position to me. And because he was, from my view, most interesting academic and man. He was he represented a modern form of criminology, and very, very distant from the criminologies which have been in particular operative, to say so, in Germany in the first half of the in the 19th century, the first half of the first 6-7 decades of the 20th century, and because he invested in research on criminal justice-based social control. And then, of course, I found a lot of interesting people in the Department of Sociology at the University of Freiburg. And it was people like Getoš Kalac, for example, a sociologist of law who worked on violence, war, and very interesting topics, in particular the question of whether the monopoly of power established through the modern state was a useful idea and enterprise, or whether it was something which should be dealt with in a very, very critical way. For example, criminologists like Niels Christie. You know Niels Christie. I think everybody's familiar with Niels Christie. He's a very, very nice man because I share a lot of ideas with him in the field of drug policies and so on. However, when it comes to the question of what to think about monopoly of power in the state, he said the state, monopoly of power, criminal justice, that is stealing conflicts. He said the state steals the conflicts of people, takes them away, and in a way does something which should not be tolerated. The state or society should give back these conflicts in the form of crimes to those who are concerned by them. And that's why Niels Christie was very much interested in mediation and all sorts of informal justice systems, while people like Getoš Kalac said, and others who studied mediation and informal justice, informal reconciliation procedures, said that doesn't work. This end in violence and in disorder. So these approaches in sociology gave me, I think, a very solid, at least for me, a very solid basis to think and to work on criminal law and criminal law-based social control. So.
Okay. Since you already addressed it a little bit, but if you could, I know the next question will be a little bit of a tricky one given the time frame. How would you describe the evolution and early development of German criminology in a nutshell? Where do your work and your criminological research fit in? So you addressed already some of it.
Yeah, it's also a very interesting question, because it's a question which I think concerns many European countries. I mean, throughout the 20th century, criminology was always part in Germany and also in other continental countries, part of law faculties. Criminology was not and is not an independent discipline, which is established at universities. In Germany, you can do that in two or three locations, in 2 or 3 universities, but it's not a separate, independent formation at universities. Criminology was always and is part of the law faculty, and therefore subject to those conditions and which you find in law faculties. So that is a basic difference when you compare that to England, to the United States, Canada, Australia, to the Anglo-American countries in particular, but also partially to Scandinavia and the Netherlands. And that is related to something which I find one of the most important factors, conditions, which explain a bit the situation of criminology and the development of criminology in Germany and also in other continental European countries. While as a lawyer, or as a sociologist, or as a psychologist, you have corresponding options in terms of professional activities, professional options which offer you career opportunities and so on, employment and so on. As a criminologist, nobody ever saw in German newspapers in the sections about employment looking for a criminologist. No. People are perhaps interested in finding a probation worker, a social worker working in the prison system and so on. But these are separate education systems, and so for criminologists there's essentially only 2 opportunities. One is the university or research institutes which have been developed in the last decades, in particular also within police bodies, because police in Germany have created many places research institutes which attract, of course, people who are knowledgeable in this area, and that is people who have been trained in criminological, theoretical, methodological issues. However, that is a major difference compared to the United States, Canada, England, or other countries where you in fact find a lot of employment opportunities for people who study criminology at universities. So that's a major problem for criminology in Germany. There's no professional opportunities, and in a way, I think that explains a bit why criminology did not develop in a way developed in the United States or in England, but was always kind of a sort of a small extension of the law faculties. And that is still today the case. Criminology is part of the law faculties, and when looking at how that developed, I must say that it didn't develop very well. In the 1970s and still a bit in the 1980s, law faculties had opened a bit and in a way also embraced social sciences, because criminal law but also civil law and administrative law said we are normative sciences, yes, But however, we have also to look at what is going on in the field. What are the outcomes of what we are doing? And that is of course important. But, and that is why you find back then a certain readiness, a certain will of law faculties to integrate empirical sciences like sociology, criminology, psychology, and so on. However, that faded out. End of the 1980s it started, and today law faculties are interested, of course, in what is called special topics like criminology, juvenile criminal law, and prison law, which provide some training for lawyers who want to go into juvenile justice or the prison system and so on. However, law faculties today are again interested in training lawyers, training traditional lawyers. So there's not much will anymore to integrate empirical sciences, sociology, psychology, and so on. That is one side. The other side is that in departments of sociology and psychology, today you don't find that these departments are interested in criminological questions anymore. So I said that back in the 1970s, I still had a lot of opportunities within the faculty of an Institute of Sociology to learn about crime and crime control and deviance and so on. Today, I think there's not one sociologist, not one psychologist who would call themselves a criminologist and specializing in criminology. That is also criminology in a way has been placed or has been restricted to a role which is not very promising when looking at the future. So there's still 3-4 universities and research institutes in Germany where criminological research groups are important. Criminological research groups are existing and working. However, in general, criminology is kind of restricted to a role which it not. I said that it's not very promising.
And I mean, for those a bit more interested in that topic, they can also read it up. I know it's there in German, potentially even in English, because that is an evolution you actually predicted. In 2012, the Freiburger Max Planck Institute, I had the good luck, the fortune to be there, and I essentially remember all the conclusions pointing directly in this direction. So more than a decade ago, you actually predicted, together with all the colleagues gathered, that it will be going into this direction. And for those who would want to read up, it is also published, and it's nicely called the Freiburger Memorandum, together with Stefan Quenzel and Cesar.
I think it's quite good to remember that memorandum, because back then already developments could be observed, which today are, I think, clearly visible in their results. That is, criminology at universities is restricted to a very, very modest role. However, what has developed quite significantly, that is criminological research within police departments. But it's of course a difference between academic criminological research on the one hand and police focused criminological research on the other hand. I do not want to say police criminological research carried out within police bodies is very, very good. However, it's focused on areas and questions which are interesting for police and policing. It is evident. So it has lost its critical elements, and a certain focus on security, safety, and surveying the questions of victimization of the public and so on.
Now, looking at your research, your publications, your travel routes, and particularly the huge impact of your research collaborations, not only in Germany, Europe, but in fact worldwide, you do not necessarily come across as the typical German criminologist. I don't mean that in a bad way, it's simply a fact, but rather as a truly European, even a global criminologist. In that sense, I would permit myself to type you as a criminological globetrotter, who left his footprints throughout the world, particularly in those regions where criminology, prior to your engagement, was not always well developed. It is no secret that you supervised a truly huge number of PhD candidates from all over the world, myself included. But how come that you developed such a strong international, even global criminological scope throughout your career? Because this is truly extraordinary, I would say.
Yeah.
Who knows you and who knows your whereabouts, and I think that's also you as you.
There's a couple of causes or reasons behind that. It's not very difficult to explain. First, and that is not a really important reason, but first I was raised and educated at a high school or gymnasium with a very big focus on languages. So from as a child I started to learn Latin, French, English and Russian. So it was a high school focused on languages. So it's a humanistisches Gymnasium. And that is why I was always interested in languages. I was always also interested in traveling to countries where I could speak with other people in languages. I learned, and that is one thing. Then, as I said at the beginning, I started to work at the Max Planck Institute in Freiburg. And the Max Planck Institute in Freiburg was, for me, a very good environment because there was always between 50, 80, 90 foreign academics, foreign researchers coming from South America, from China, Japan, from African countries, from many European countries, in particular Spain, Italy, but also Poland. And back then, in the 1970s, 1980s, the Max Planck Institute in Freiburg was among the first research institutes having a link or starting to cooperate with Hungarian, Polish, Russian, or back then Soviet Union-based academics and research institutes. As a very young person or a criminologist, I came into contact with a lot of people with corresponding interests, who came from various parts of the world. And that was for me the most interesting part of this work. So I started to develop links to various regions, and that is obviously a mix of reasons which ultimately resulted in my way of life, which you consider to be compared to globetrotters. However, it's also in a way linked to personal conditions. I do not have a family which I must care for. So I'm, in a way, a free person. No, that's not something I always embrace as a condition, but it provided for the opportunity to develop this kind of life, which is concentrated and focused on research and developing research in various areas. And that is also part of my research interests in terms of in particular comparative approaches to look into conditions of social control and criminal law-based control which develop under certain cultural and historical and economic social conditions, which are different from the conditions you find in Germany, Europe, or in the Western world. And I think that is also quite important to try to widen the perspective and to go away a bit from this European-centered, also Western-centered perspectives on crime, criminal law, and crime control.
In this you succeeded marvelously because you obviously left a huge impact. I can testify, at least when it comes to the Balkans.
Okay, that is your judgment.
Yeah, that is my judgment, yeah, and we have empirical proof on that. Anyway, I mean, since you addressed it, and I've known you for quite some time, and I know you're a free spirit, which also was very good that you were the director of the Max Planck Institute, because I think there's little, if comparable, any positions that would allow such level of freedom. But preparing for this interview, we discussed also the question of whether you regret that you could not conduct research into a topic of your liking, or that you had to work on research that you rather would have avoided. Now, as director of the Max Planck Institute, you were essentially completely free to design the research focuses as you wished, but nevertheless, even you had to jump through a couple of loops, one loop, and also with regards to their obligations at the University of Freiburg Faculty of Law wasn't there. So you also were not totally in.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, as a director of the Max Planck Institute, you have certain obligations, certain tasks which take away a lot of time, and which in particular take away opportunities to carry out research yourself. That is something I like particularly. I like to collect data. I like to work with data. I like to write, and during the last 30, 40 years, conditions were such that I had a lot of administrative and so on tasks, which in a way restricted my options or my opportunities to carry out research. Of course, in the Max Planck Society is dependent, and Max Planck Institutes are dependent on a good relationship to law faculties or to universities in general, because Max Planck Institute, the Max Planck Society has no right to issue PhDs. So you have to be a member of a law faculty or institute. I'm a member of the Institute of Sociology and a member of the law faculty, but only as members of these university departments I am able to have PhD students. And that is something which creates certain dependencies. And in order to become a member of a department at university, these departments ask for a certain contribution. And the contribution is you have to get involved in exams, and law exams, for example, or university training, lecturing, and so on. So that is why I'm now, I feel a bit more relaxed, and I have more opportunities to do what I always like to do, that is doing research myself. Working with data, collecting data, and developing strategies for collecting data. That's something I like very much.
And since you also addressed the last but not the least question, what are you currently working on? I guess you have several publications in the pipeline, but which one would you pick as the most intriguing one for you?
It's a
tricky one.
The most tricky one concerns something which is tricky for a couple of reasons. 4 years ago, I started with two colleagues a study on the development of criminology and criminological research in the former Soviet Union. And because when looking at what publications and when looking at criminological literature, we see that we know almost nothing about the former Soviet Union, and also not that much about the east of Europe. That is why today this conference, European Society of Criminology conferences, criminology goes east. In a way, it's a good thing to do, because I think it's important to include the former Soviet Union, but we do not know much. So we started to work on that, and we also managed to create a design and to start to collect data. But then came the Ukrainian-Russian war, and that interrupted a bit the whole process. But I'm still hopeful that we will be able to conclude that research in the next 1-2 years. And that is, I think, something which will be quite useful for the not only in German, but the European criminology. Another area where I try to carry out research is drug policies, and in particular also the question of the legalization of cannabis and the outcomes of legalization of cannabis in Germany and in other European countries where that legalization came into effect in recent years. So that is something which will keep me alive, I hope, in the next years. And I'm looking very much forward to it.
Me too, and I have absolutely no doubts that this will keep you ongoing. With this, we will end now. I thank you for your time and the willingness to share the story of your criminological career and experience, which will undoubtedly contribute tremendously in this project's endeavor to puzzle together the history of European criminology and make it broadly available to the whole criminological community. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.